NBA champ Kendrick Perkins. We also have two-time WNBA All-Star Chiney Ogwumike and senior writer and host of The Low Post, Zach Lowe. And trade season, it's already upon us. So before we get into the panel, I want to bring in our senior NBA insider, Adrian Wojnarowski. And Woj, yesterday you broke the news that Bradley Beal is going to have season-ending surgery on his wrist. So what led to that decision?
Well, the torn ligament in the wrist and just the idea right now of getting that healed. He had been playing through pain with that injury, but I think to get it healed, get it corrected, and obviously this is a big summer for Bradley Beal, a lot of decisions for him to make, and obviously a Wizards team who's been on the wrong trajectory this season, and it just made sense to get that injury taken care of and get the surgery.
Absolutely. And Woj, you mentioned this summer with Beal having the option to become a free agent. How confident are the Wizards that they can re-sign him?
Well, I was told that Bradley Beal, his agent, Mark Bartelstein with Priority Sports, met on Monday with Tommy Shepard, the GM in Washington, and owner Ted Leonsis. And besides talking about the injury and the fact that they ultimately landed on that they'd get the surgery, they talked about the roster construction, where the team was headed, what the vision was for continuing to build a team around Bradley Beal. And that's a conversation you can expect that they'll continue to have in Washington as they head toward either the possibility of him signing an extension or, of course, perhaps testing free agency. This is a conversation that's been ongoing between Bradley Beal, Mark Bartelstein, and the Wizards for some time. And there's a lot to consider here. There's certainly a lot of interest all over the league. But you have seen with Bradley Beal a tremendous loyalty to Washington, to that organization. But he's finally hit a crossroads now this summer where he's going to have to really make a choice.
Absolutely. Let's go from the east to the west here, Woj, because you just broke a trade in the last hour involving the Jazz, the Spurs, and the Trailblazers. So how does this set the Jazz up for the rest of the season? You can see the details on the screen there.
Well, Malika, once the Jazz lost Joe Ingles to the ACL injury, it became even more likely they were going to use his expiring contract in a trade. And to get back to Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who comes from the Blazers, just moved there yesterday and as part of the C.J. McCollum trade. Now, they get a 23-year-old player who's shown to be to really be able to have an impact offensively. A lot of potential in this player. The Jazz certainly have a development program there under Quinn Snyder where you've seen young players really grow. So he's somebody for down the road, but also is going to be a part of their rotation this year. They move out Elijah Hughes to Portland, young player who the Blazers like, and a couple second-round picks, both to the Spurs, one to the Spurs, one to Portland. But this is a Jazz team now, as Joe Ingles goes, and listen, there's a chance certainly that he finds his way back to Utah as a free agent. He's, again, on an expiring deal. He's had a great run in Utah, intertwined in that community, but he'll rehab that ACL, and certainly now for the Jazz, getting in Alexander Walker's a player that's, for a team that is trying to get righted, starting to get their players back, he's going to play a role for them.
Absolutely. And Woj, since you're here, I want to ask you about another name that's been circulating during the trade season, Jeremy Grant. Are the Pistons, are they expected to move him before tomorrow's deadline?
The Pistons have a pretty high threshold for Grant, and that's been around 2 first-round picks. And Portland's certainly a team that has interest. Damian Lillard, for one, he has had some hopes that Portland could acquire him back to last year when he was less available. But I think for Detroit, they are perfectly willing to just go into the offseason with Grant. He's got another year left on his deal. They could sign him to an extension. They could look at doing a deal at the at the draft or around free agency. I think if the trade deadline was in the next hour, they would not have a deal for him but we still have a day left.
We still have a day left, and we will be watching, looking at our phones. I'm going to let you get back to work. I know you have so much to do between now and the trade deadline. Thank you for stopping by, Woj. I do want to get back to Bradley Beal here to detail his options. So for our front office insider, Bobby Marks, is joining us. So, Bobby, what can you tell us about the deal that Bradley Beal can do? What are his options?
Yeah, I mean, that $181 million extension is still sitting there, and it's likely he's not going to sign it. It's been well known, so we could take that off the board right now. He's got that $36.4 million player option, likely to decline that. He could sign that big contract with Washington, 5 years, $245 million. Here's the interesting thing. He could also opt into that number. If he wakes up one morning and says, I don't want to be a Wizard anymore, I want to go to another team, he can opt in. We've talked about it with James Harden, and sign a 4-year, $199 million extension after he's been traded, 6 months after. So essentially, he's only going to lose about $4 million. Here's the thing. Beal has a trade bonus in his contract. So if he's traded, he's going to get $5.4 million. So he'll make up the difference, what he would be leaving on the table with Washington than what he could sign with a new team. So there's not much of a difference there. And then, of course, the cap space route. 4 years, $182 million. But Indiana, Detroit, Portland, Orlando, San Antonio, not contending teams right now. So here's the two options to keep an eye on. The 5 years, $245, and then certainly that opt-in, and then possibly asked to be moved at the, in the offseason.
Well, and Bobby, you have to imagine, right, that if Bradley Beal comes to the Washington Wizards, we just heard Woj say that if he wants something else, this is a continuous dialogue, right? And Woj said that this is something that they've been chatting about. So you have to imagine that if Bradley Beal wants out, he's been so loyal to that franchise, they're going to work with him. I want to bring in the entire panel here, Zach, Chiney, and Big Perk. And Big Perk, I'll start with you. Do you believe that we have seen Bradley Beal play his last minutes in a Wizards uniform?
You know what? I don't know the answer to that question, and here's why. It seemed like every single year, Bradley Beal's name get brought up about whether or not he should leave the Wizards or is he going to stay or whatever the case may be. I think Bradley Beal got to decide what do he want to do. Like, do he want to continue to stay in Washington and be that guy, be that go-to guy, or do he want to leave and actually be probably a second-tier guy or robbing to somebody else and try to go compete for a championship? Look, everybody have different goals for us when they're in the NBA, for us what they want to achieve and what they want to accomplish. But I'm going to say this like I used to say in the locker room to the young guys. Do not pass up your lettuce. Get all the money you possibly can, because at the end of the day, I get it. It's entertainment to us. It's entertainment to the fans. But at the end of the day, it's a job, and you're supposed to maximize and get as much money as you can before this is all over.
Well, and that's one thing that's so interesting about what Bobby just told us, is that he has multiple options that would get to similar lettuce, if you will, Zach.
He's not going to leave any lettuce on the table, and your Perk's right, he shouldn't. This is a players' league. The money either goes to the teams or the players. Give it to the players. They're the ones we're paying to watch. So I think it's a coin flip. As Perk has said, the noise has been all over the place in terms of whether these are his last minutes or he's played his last minutes with the Wizards. I think, honestly, I bet he watches the last 20 games of the season and says, let's see what this team's got. Let's see how these young guys progress. Can Spencer Dinwiddie, who's had really a disappointing season for them, can he find his game? Is there something for me to come back to here where I have hope? And if there's not, if they continue to play like they're playing, I would lean towards some fireworks this summer.
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. Coming from the player perspective, the number one question when you have decisions like this is loyalty, and you feel that pressure. You want to be at a franchise that you feel like you've taken them to the mountaintop. But like you said, Perk, sometimes the only thing that's loyal is the bread, while your body is the way you make your money. And I think it's fascinating that, Bobby, I'm looking at you, that you brought up, and thank you for breaking it down in a way that I can understand. The trade bonus, how he could potentially get more money by getting traded, which is another test of loyalty. Am I correct? I mean, I don't think his mic's on, but he said yes. So I just wanted to verify that. But the fact, that's another, like, hearing that as a test of loyalty. I spoke to Damian Lillard quite a bit about his situation. We're friends. We've been knowing each other for a couple years now. And I feel like these guys are at similar junction points, Dame and Bradley Beal. Both guys that the cities have really embraced, both guys that have put their whole heart, body, and soul and their game out there and maxed out in certain scenarios. And the question is, what do you want that legacy to be? Do you want a tag team with another star? And you see sometimes it works out really well, but look at Brooklyn, sometimes it's way more complicated. That's what's going through their heads. And I do think that Bradley is loyal, but at some point you have to take your cues from the front office, like we're seeing with Portland, getting Coach Chauncey Billups in there, starting to make these trades. You know, CJ was always in conversations about trades, but now you're seeing things happening. All right, maybe that takes a little pressure off of the athlete. You need to see those same things happening in Washington. And I feel like because Portland has been in the playoffs, the urgency is not on them per se right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think watching those last 20 games, watching, the way the rest of the season plays out, watching what they're able to do. Because remember, at the beginning of the year, we were like, are the Wizards something? Is something happening over there? And then over the course of the season, it evened out. But I do think, Chiney, at this point, watching everything that Bradley Beal has given that organization, no one could fault him.
Yep.
Really, whatever decision he makes.
No way.
Here. No
way.
Not at all. This night's game. So for the second straight game, Russ was benched by Coach Frank Vogel, and he was subbed out in the third quarter, and he did not return. So here's how Russ reacted to the benching after the loss. Take a listen.
I put a lot of work in. I got a lot of respect in this game. I don't have to hit a benchmark. I shouldn't have to. I earned the right, to be in closing lineups. Numbers would tell you. I don't have to explain that. But like I said, once again, that ain't my decision. That's the decision that he and the staff think is best for the game. And unfortunately, just got to go with it.
There's a moment right before the end of the game where you went over to LeBron and AD on the bench. Can you kind of take me through what was going on
give them
there?
Encouragement, just keep their head up, keep playing. Tough night. And I told them I wish I could help them. Unfortunately, I wasn't in the game to be able to help them. And that's why I came here to be able to help them out. So unfortunately, haven't been able to do that, for them, but that's not my call.
All right, so I'd like to welcome our insider, Brian Windhorst, to the conversation. So, Brian, can the Lakers make it work with Westbrook after what we just heard?
The next few days are going to be really important with Russ because taking that position where he's not willing to go along with potentially sitting at the end of close games and maybe at some point even coming off the bench, not even being in the starting lineup, that's going to be a very important thing for the Lakers over the next few days. Because when you look at the numbers, Russ is referring to his career numbers. His career numbers are awesome. He's a Hall of Famer. But this season's numbers do not support playing him at the end of close games. And even if the eye test doesn't support it, and that's going to be a huge thing for the Lakers to manage in these next few days.
Well, and Perk, take a look at these numbers so we can kind of see exactly what Brian is talking about here.
You know what? The numbers is fine, but I'm extremely bothered by Russ and those comments after the game.
In what sense?
In a bad way. For the simple fact that accountability is huge, and Russell Westbrook is shying away from that word for some reason. And he can't sit up here and tell, hey, I was brought here to help, but it's out of my hands. No, it's been in your hands. You just haven't delivered. And you know what's weird to me is that they have a guy over there by the name of Phil Handy, Coach Phil Handy, arguably the best workout guy, the developmental guy in the NBA. And for some reason, Russell Westbrook just won't give Phil Handy a chance. And every night I'm watching his game struggle. And so the problem that I have is that you can't come on here and blame Coach Frank Vogel, because Coach Frank Vogel then stuck with you long enough. He's tolerated. He's had your back in multiple interviews saying Russ will be fine. We got to get our chemistry. Sooner or later, he got to figure it out. He has to put the best players on the floor at the time that he think could win the game. And right now, Russell Westbrook is not in that conversation. What Russell Westbrook needs to do is get the trust back of not only his coaches, but his players. Because we just saw in the video, LeBron and AD wasn't trying to hear that. They're like, nah, dog, you got to pick your game up. They was not trying to hear that. They didn't tell them that, but they wasn't trying to hear that. Look at it. They're not trying to hear that.
No, I agree. And when I saw that, I saw a player that was not necessarily involved based on the reality. in the NBA, in basketball overall, you got to be able to get a bucket. Like, you cannot be a liability on offense anymore. And if you are, you've got to create one. And I think he struggled creating them. He struggled scoring. And on a night where normally you see AD go 8 for 10 and LeBron James 11 for 19, and they both combined for about 50 points, you would think that this team would be competitive. But instead, Russ is 3 for 11, 0 for 1 from 3. You're not creating a case for yourself. And I do think that, at points, Russ has been able to be the dog wherever he goes, whether that's OKC, Houston, the Wizards, and now LA. This is a lot of pressure and expectation, not only playing for Los Angeles, but coming back to your hometown where all your family's there, and then trying to acclimate in a season where LeBron was out in the beginning, AD out in the middle, and now you're all back together trying to save the season. I think, what are they, 26 and 29 right now? Trying to make sure they don't end up in a situation where they were in the play-in, and that really hurt them and put them in positioning. But you've got to play and perform at a high level in order to make this push. And I think he hasn't, per se, as Wendy, you've said, given the requisite evidence for a coach to say, I see why you need to be out there. And lastly, I'll say this. For Russ, everyone deals with flaws, quote unquote, within your game. Perk, you made a great point about, all right, go work out with the trainer, Phil Handy. Everyone knows him in the basketball world. You soak up that type of knowledge. What can you do if you're not knocking down your shot? Everyone knows in basketball, if they're not guarding you, dribble handoff. The next person coming off can be a shooter. Being intentional with those movements to create shots for other people. Screening, that's number one, too. Focusing on assisting the ball. Like, if you know that's your primary choice, do that. Those are things that you as a veteran have to move the pride to the side and say, if I'm here to win, and people won't care if you have 0 or 5 points and you win and you have 15 assists. We've seen that. Sorry, I'm just...
No, you're real, but Bill, Bill $41 million or 40, what would Russ make?
40?
$40-something million.
44.
Right now, Bill $44 million Alex Caruso. Be that. Be a guy that has 0 points, 7 steals, and impact in the game that way if you're not being able to score. But here's the thing that I want to point out when I look at Russ. Right now, Russ is being challenged because now he finally has to play basketball. Where he's been on teams where they're just hooping. Think about it. The Houston Rockets was just open court and just running. It wasn't real high IQ or having to go with how can I make this work? Or no, it was James Harden, Russell Westbrook. Y'all get up and down and do y'all thing. Same thing with the Wizards. Same thing when we was with Oklahoma City. But now it comes a point in time where, guess what, Russ? You actually got to play basketball.
Right.
You actually got to be a basketball player with a basketball IQ in the moment. And Russ is struggling, and Russ need to hold himself accountable of that and not Frank Vogel.
Well, Dave McMenamin had some interesting reporting in his post-game story last night, which essentially said that folks inside the locker room had told him that there's a little bit of an admission that this roster really isn't working, Brian. So I have to ask, is there any chance the Lakers look to move Westbrook before tomorrow's trade deadline?
Yeah, in recent discussions with the Lakers, teams who've talked to them have found that they are not willing to include the 2027 first-round pick. That's the only first-round pick they can trade. If you take that off the table, finding a trade for Westbrook and without it being able to attach that pick, I think is very hard. I wouldn't say anything's impossible, but right now, from what I understand, the conversations the Lakers are having are with Talen Horton-Tucker. And I'm not so sure that's going to make a massive difference in the roster.
Right. Well, and we've also heard folks say that this is not necessarily a movable player. Looking at the size of his contract, looking at the very few options, Bobby Marks has broken it down for us before that are out there. It doesn't seem all that likely. Thank you so much, Brian. All right, plenty more expiring deal, a lottery-protected first and also 2 seconds. So LeVert will add scoring punch to a Cleveland team whose guards average the fewest points per game in the league. Let's go over to the Pelicans because they acquired C.J. McCollum and Larry Nance Jr. from the Blazers for a package led by Josh Hart, a protected first and also 2 seconds. So McCollum is one of 8 players to average 20 points per game in each of the last 7 seasons. That includes this one. And then the Pacers, they traded 25-year-old two-time All-Star Domantas Sabonis to the Kings in a deal that brought back Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield. Halliburton, remember, he's averaged 19 and 10 in 12 games without De'Aaron Fox this season and now becomes a Pacers cornerstone. And we are inching closer to the trade deadline tomorrow. We are going to have it covered with a 3-hour show, so be sure to tune in to ESPN. But Zach, we have a mini trade with the Heat here. What can you tell us?
A mini trade. The Heat have traded KZ Okpala to the Thunder, but that's not what matters. As part of the trade, the Heat and the Thunder amended the terms of a first-round pick. Miami owes OKC, and as Bobby could explain, what it really allows to do is the Heat can suddenly trade this year's first-round pick or next year's, and never underestimate, what do you call them, Perk? The goons from Dade County? Never underestimate Pat Riley. Always scheming. The problem, though, is they don't have a lot of expendable salary to trade to attach those picks, so we'll see if they can do anything, but never, they're always plotting. They're always plotting.
Never underestimate the goons from Dade County. All right, Bobby Marks, he is back with us, so we are going to walk through some potential trade scenarios for the deadline tomorrow. So I want to start with the New York Knicks, Bobby. They lost in Denver last night. New York has now lost 4 in a row, and they sit at 12th in the Eastern Conference. Remember, they were the 4th seed in the East last year. So, Bobby, what options do the Knicks have in terms of trades here?
Well, I've been the cheerleader for patience and continuity, and I think, I think we could throw it out the window right now, right? I mean, that's been the big thing as far as they finished 4th in the East last year. They basically brought back the same roster, added Kemba Walker, Evan Fournier, kind of lost their DNA a little bit as far as that defensive mentality. And here's the big question. Can you keep on building around Julius Randle? No. Remember, that extension has not even kicked in yet. 4 years, $106 million that start next year. They've got a lot, as I call it, the sweet spot of a deal. 6 players that earn between $9 and $22 million. I would say the lone untouchable is R.J. Barrett.
Yes, agreed.
Right. Lone untouchable is R.J. Barrett.
Yes, that would be the only player. Hey, if you're calling for Kevin Durant, he's not untouchable. Right. But for what they're looking to do, I would put him on the untouchable.
Agreed.
And then they've got draft assets, 8 future firsts, including that Dallas pick next year that's top 10 protected. So there's stuff there to go out and make a deal. But as I said, do they continue with that patience and continuity?
Well, I mean, Perk emphatically said no. But what exactly are the Knicks missing here, Zach?
Just talent. I mean, they just don't have enough perimeter shot creation right now. Kemba Walker's been so up and down and has been down lately. But the problem is a lot of these contracts, I think they'd have to attach a pick to get off Evan Fournier's contract. I don't think that's an appealing contract. Alec Burks probably has some value. He's been good for them. And, untouchable R.J. Barrett, is he untouchable if you're calling about Damian Lillard?
No. Okay, we don't know what we mean by untouchable, but I agree, Zach. I do think that, R.J. Barrett, he's one of those people that you want to protect. You don't want to make a Halliburton-esque type of mistake with someone that's developing. Is that a new word here? Okay, I'm so sorry. Too soon. Too soon. My bad. Okay.
That is, wow, Chiney. All right, that's too soon. I promised Perk that we wouldn't have to wait too long, so let's switch over to the Western Conference with the Memphis Grizzlies because they beat the Clippers by 26 points last night. Ja Morant, he led the way with 30 points and took a hard foul from Marcus Morris, which then resulted in a flagrant 2 ejection. So you can take a look here, right? Memphis is currently 3rd in the West, trailing only Golden State. So, Bobby, this team, already really good. I think Perk would say really, 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 really good. So what options do they actually have ahead of the trade deadline?
Really good, but the cake is not baked yet. And don't take it out of the oven, right? It's still formulating here. And I think when you look at it from their roster, we can't get there. Here we go. They are the model franchise in roster building. So anyone out there who wants to get in this industry, study what the Grizzlies have done as far as how they've built their roster. 20th in payroll, the second youngest team in the NBA. I think we forget about that. They've got 10 first-round picks to trade. They've got the Lakers, Utah, Golden State, flexibility in the offseason. But how they operate is that they rarely add in free agency. Potential could have cap space. This team, they're there, but not quite where Phoenix is yet. But they'll be there soon.
Well, Perk, the floor is yours. What do you think? Should they make any moves or upgrades here?
No, I think they should stand pat. And part of the reason is because a lot of their guys they drafted. And so when you look at it, they have their superstar in Ja Morant, obviously. They have a guy who could possibly win Defensive Player of the Year in Jaren Jackson Jr., but you have wings and guard play that you can't just trade away. Like, when you look at Desmond Baines, when you look at Melton that comes in off the bench, even Clark, he plays like that 4-5, like, a small version of the 5 in the second unit. Big Steven Adams doing his role, and they got great continuity. By the way, Tyus Jones arguably is the best backup PG in the game. And right now, look, I'm telling you this, okay? Memphis is for real. Their ceiling, in my opinion, is the Western Conference Finals. I believe that they could beat any team in the West in the 7-game series because of their swagger. And you heard what Josh said after he got that flagrant. I mean, I got knocked out. I played on concrete all my life. You saw me get up, and that's the type of energy you need. So if I'm Memphis earlier in the year, I said, you know what? You might want to consider trade Dylan Brooks, get a Jaylen Brown. But now if I'm Memphis, I ain't doing a damn thing.
Nothing, Zach?
I think that's exactly from what I've heard what Memphis is doing. They got their feet up on the desk. If the phone rings, they'll pick it up. You're going to offer me something crazy. But other than that, they're watching the fireworks like everybody else. They love their team. They love their culture. They'll listen if you call like 2 seconds for Jared Culver or something like that. But they're not doing anything big. They're not screwing this up. They're just enjoying it like the rest of us.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think a lot of times in the NBA, you see teams getting wins because they have a great aggregation of talent. Like they can wake up 3 or 4 players and go get you buckets. You have a true team here. The last time I felt this vibe that was happening from the ground up was, the Warriors, honestly, and how they built and how they've invested and developed.
Yep.
And so protect that at all costs.
Protect that at all costs. Also protect Bobby Marks at all costs because we're going to need you so much tomorrow ahead of the trade deadline. Bobby, thank you so much for joining. Teams battled it out last night in Philadelphia as the Suns took on the 76ers. There you can see Joel Embiid, Devin Booker going head-to-head all night, Janae.
This was a good one. I mean, check this out right here. When you're in the fourth quarter and you need a bucket, you go to your center from 3? What?
Joel Embiid, though, he's been unreal. But look at this. Chris Paul misses.
Crafty play by Jay Crowder, and bam, 3-point play right there. That's a swing of possessions that really helped the Suns down the stretch.
Well, and that's why they've been noted as one of the best clutch time teams, if not the best. Straight
Run,
up.
Devin, run.
Booker. All the way.
Top finish. That's basketball right there. How bad do you want it? Don't dribble. Finish it. And what, son?
Well, but then going the other way.
Look at this play right here. One man, that's a center, taking on the whole squad and finishing with a dunk. He wants to win MVP. That is telling you exactly why.
Well, let's go ahead to the very end of the game, though. 30 seconds left. The ball is in Chris Paul's hands.
Heartbreaker.
Maxey guarding him.
MVP's play, getting a steal, but then right here, watch this, the outlet pass too far. You're telling me you had a chance.
Well, and look at Joel Embiid's face here. Look at his body language.
Gets the steal on Chris Paul, and man, not in stride, and that's where the game was lost.
Well, and the Phoenix Suns win at 119, 114, 109. Check that. Here's Joel Embiid after the game.
Anybody's welcome to play, and if you want to be part of us, I'm sure everybody's gonna be fine with it. But you gotta show up. You gotta want to be there, and I'm sure everybody's gonna accept whoever that is. I get paid to win results and win games. I don't get paid to babysit Tyrese, or I get paid to challenge him to try to help me win games. I get paid to, do the same thing to Tobias and, all the other guys, and they respond. For the guys that are here, and if you're here, I'm going to challenge you, and we're going to challenge each other to be better and try to win a championship.
So that's not the first time this season we've heard Joel Embiid use the term babysitter, joined now by Zach, Perk, and Chiney. So, Zach, I'm going to start with you. Do the 76ers, as presently constructed, have enough to win the East right now?
First of all, babysitting is a tough job. Nobody wants to be a babysitter.
Like, $5 an hour to do it.
Look, you can start to talk yourself into it. They're near the top of the East. The Bucks right now, their center is injured. They don't have a great matchup for Embiid. I still think the Sixers are just a little bit short. Look at what the Bucks have done. They just destroyed the Lakers last night. They're 23-5 with their big three healthy. They're hopeful Lopez will come back at some point. And people, we never talk about them. The Heat are just sitting there getting healthy. And I think both of those teams I would probably take in a playoff series over Philadelphia. But the fact that we're even having this discussion is a tribute to what Joel Embiid, especially him, has done this year. What a majestic season.
Yeah, and you think about the top of the East. You just mentioned the Bucks, who we all know can repeat if they so choose. The Miami Heat, they improved. The Chicago Bulls, they improved. And then the 76ers, they're probably playing with a majority of their, last year's roster. The only person that really has improved so much to put the team on the back is Joel Embiid. I mean, listening to him talk, can't you guys just sort of feel that he's arrived? Like, we've always known he's been fun, that he's super talented, but it seems like he's figured it out. Like his game, he's figured it out, how to handle the media, how to not get too much into the Twitter sphere where, you know, the conversations can be sort of a distraction. Joel Embiid deserves all the props this season for keeping them in contention and then also getting those role players to really step their games up in moments that matter most. We'll see, like, we'll determine if they can contend, but you have to be proud of the effort that Philly has put in so far, minus Ben Simmons.
Absolutely, but I think we are taking the other guys for granted. They're very underrated. We have to realize this team was Ben Simmons layup away or a couple possessions away of actually going to the Eastern Conference Finals last year. And some may say that if Tyrese Maxey was in the game instead of Ben Simmons, that they would have won the game. He has improved so much. That's why Philly don't want to give him up. But when you look at their team and you look at Embiid, when you look at the Eastern Conference, first of all, the Eastern Conference is wide open. Yes, I got Miami as my favorite, but that still don't mean that Philly can't be playing great basketball. Tobias Harris living up to his contract, Seth Curry knocking down those shots like we know he can. But it's nobody, no answer in the NBA for Joel Embiid. Period. It's Kevin Durant, then it's Joel Embiid.
Facts.
You have zero answer for him.
Facts.
So if he's at his best, he could take you through a 7-game series.
I'd put Giannis in that conversation. I would put
yeah,
him.
good addition.
No, but he's dominant, Malika. I'm talking about pure out skills. See, pure out skills. There's certain ways you could guard Giannis. You're not just going to sag off it.
Can I just say it's telling, overarching this entire discussion, that we barely brought up Brooklyn? Like, that's how haywire the situation has gotten.
Right.
Don't want to bring
Absolutely. Before we go too far down that rabbit hole, because we could go for a while, I do want to switch gears to the All-Star Weekend, the celebrity game in particular, because Big Perk, our buddy over here, and Richard Jefferson, they're going to be analysts for the game. Cassidy Hubbarth will be on the broadcast hosting, and then Monica McNutt is going to be our sideline
Monica.
reporter. So let's take a look at these rosters. Team Walton,
I actually was
coached by
excited
Hall of
till I saw
Famer
Richard.
Bill Walton. I'm sorry, Perk. I'm sorry. But the roster, Bill Walton's roster, features comedian Tiffany Haddish, rapper Quavo, and the musician Machine Gun Kelly.
What's up,
And
Brittany Elena and De'Erica Hamby? Sorry.
coached by Dominique Wilkins. That includes rapper Jack Harlow, Browns defensive end Myles Garrett, and then Peloton instructor Alex Toussaint. So, Perk, I understand you and Richard have some sort of maybe bet on this game. Can you explain? I don't know if I want you to explain what's going on.
Well, first of all, he was sitting here with his feet kicked up, calling me out, and I just see him Squidward early this morning calling me out about the bet. Here's the thing that I want to say. I'm supposed to be the assistant coach to Team Neat. We have Myles Garrett, okay? And if anybody haven't seen Myles Garrett hoop, you need to go watch film. All right, we already know he got muscles on top of muscles, 6% body fat, probably a 40-inch vertical, but he actually could play. So we're going to run our offense to him. But for us betting, I'm not betting Richard because I really don't want to be there because he's going to be there.
I mean, I understand that.
You
Plus,
get
you
it.
already whipped out those push-ups like nobody's business the other day. So, I mean, I can't. Richard, I'm sorry. I'm going with Team Perk. I just am. Zach, thank you so much for joining us today. We will see you back here tomorrow. Please don't leave me hanging.
I know. He always
leaves me hanging.
I just don't see it coming. I don't see it coming. That's all.
All right, eventually. So, an important detail about this broadcast is that beyond the women you'll see on camera, an entire production staff of women will be working on the game behind the scenes. And as a woman who works in sports, I know that many of us, I know I do, want our work to speak for itself. But today, I do want to shine a spotlight on the women whose work you see on television every single day, but you might not even know their role exists. Their work is so crucial to getting what you're watching on air. And tonight, that's Sarah Gallero, the coordinating producer of the game. That's Jocelyn Meyer, the director. And it's Lori Privatera, the producer. And so many more women who are the foundation of our NBA coverage. So now, like we always do as women, let's get back to work because we now welcome in Warriors reporter Kendra Andrews, who's in Utah ahead of tonight's matchup between the Jazz and Golden State. So Kendra, I want to start with Klay Thompson, who's been in a little bit of a groove these last few games, but he's been cleared to increase his minutes. Klay is resting tonight, but what are the Warriors' plans for him moving forward here?
Well, Malika, Klay has been resting on one end of back-to-back since he returned, so he's out tonight against the Jazz, but he will be available tomorrow back in San Francisco against the New York Knicks. And I'm told that this is going to be the Warriors' plan for him for the foreseeable future, and they're really going to defer to their training staff to decide when he will be available in both games of back-to-back series. Now, as for that minute increase, it has been bumped up to 30, and he played a season